Good morning, Africa. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, Akwa Ibom State. It's a beautiful Friday morning, and this is Rise and Shine. We're coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. My name is Uyai Aneka, and it's a great delight to be here this morning. I wish I could say thank God it's Friday.
Well, indeed, I know it feels like you should be able to say that, but unfortunately, I thank God it's Friday is always going to be thank God it's Saturday. But we love it because we're always going to be here to help you kickstart your morning, whether it's on a weekday or on a weekend. My name is Francis Oyimaedet. I'm glad to have you join us this morning. Of course, we'll always encourage you to follow us on social media platform at Spectrum TV.ng and be part of online community, of course. We're not forgetting the fact that we're still calling for collaborations and partners and sponsors to ensure that Rise and Shine, keeps growing from strength to strength. So you can just hit them up and let us know you want to be part of any of the segments of Rise and Shine. I would definitely be delighted to have these conversations with you. But of course, today is another day to talk Nigeria, talk Africa, talk the world and all that is happening around it. And I think between yesterday and this morning, I've had a lot of, flash news headlines or news headlines that, tickles my fancy.
What would you first one? Because I think my tickler is the fact that former U.S. President Donald Trump has been arrested, for all of those charges that were leveled against him. One of them, of course, in relation to him trying to overturn the 2020 election in his favor. I think that just came like Donald Trump arrested.
Well, that was expected. That was long expected for me. I mean, America is not Nigeria, where you think, just because someone has gotten to the apex of government, those people are above the law. There are stronger institutions over there than, it's been said we have here in Nigeria. So it didn't come as a surprise to many people within and outside the shores of the U.S. But guess what? During the 9th Assembly, we had a whole lot of conversations about the number of bills related to women that were thrown out in a country that is a member and have signed different agreements towards, ensuring that gender equality is a priority. But we saw all of the drama that happened, all of the bills that were thrown out. So for me, the trigger this morning is finding out that the 10th Assembly, the 10th House of Rep, is really ready to, look at some of those bills that were thrown out as a way of ensuring that there is women inclusivity in politics.
That's a big news. Of course, it's something that we're still going to come to, this morning. It's great news to see that the energy is different, in the 10th NAS. But let's start all the way from the top. Remember, today is Friday, and we level it up a little bit to look at, the human angle side of stories, what's really happening with people, and how best we can, stay safe in the world and in the Nigeria that we have found ourselves as we, progressively get to a better path. But this morning, we're looking at the fact that there's been a spate of, cases of stories told about lecturers' sex for grades. It was about 2 weeks ago that a certain lecturer in the University of Calabar was, hounded on social media for, sexual harassment. The females of the Department of Law in Unical came out to say enough of, these kinds of harassment. But then we're seeing some women group in the country ask President Tinubu to assent to the sexual harassment bill. Of course, this bill has been in the works for the longest time. Just to piggyback on some of the things that Francis was saying this morning about pushing some, gender-friendly bills that would cover the women. So, of course, we see the fact that a group, the Women's Network, has appealed to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to assent to the Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal of Sexual Harassment in Tertiary Educational Institutions bill passed by the 9th National Assembly. Of course, this bill was passed by the National Assembly, but it needs to be assented into law. And if it is assented into law, what will be the addendums, what will be the benefits of this kind of law to, the tertiary institution environment. Of course, sex for grades and other related offences within this bracket have become a nuisance in our higher institutions of learning. And I think it was a few days back that we're having the conversation of how people have to switch schools or switch departments because of these kinds of harassment. You're going to spend longer time in school, or you also find out that, you know, a student will read and pass, but because they do not want to indulge with lecturers, you find out that, you know, they keep on carrying over courses. Either they, you know, pay their way through, or, you know, some of them will budge just because they do not want to keep failing in school. So this is a major problem. We also see the network, the Women's Network, also recommend that educational institutions in Nigeria should, as a matter of necessity, develop a sexual and gender harassment policy to safeguard the dignity of girls with a view to providing a safe environment for learning. Now, that will take us back and, you know, to ask a very big question. In the case where, you know, you have these kinds of lecturers within the rank and file of higher institutions of learning, is there the willingness on the parts of the vice chancellors and, you know, other board members in these institutions to deal with these things? Because like in the case of the said lecturer in the University of Calabar, it was more like, you know, some students were saying even if you go report to the next person above him, they have like a cartel and they have a way to deal with these things, and sometimes it's just swept under the carpet and the person is not addressed, the person is not punished. I mean, that lecturer has been in the system for several years. We had people who he had taught several years back coming out to say, oh, of a truth, this is true about this person, you know, at the end of the day. So is there the willingness on the part of the minders of the system within the tertiary institution to punish, you know, anyone found culpable with these kinds of, you know, harassment?
Well, you recall that the first thing I'd said it's likely going to happen after the Unical scenario was that we might be seeing a lot of that happening across. Just yesterday we saw students of Unizik, you know, also protesting about sexual harassment, calling for the release of a certain report that was done as a result of, you know, different harassment cases. And of course, the report is said to have implicated a lot of lecturers, which the institution swept under the carpet and didn't take action. So as it's been alleged, we've seen this happening across the institution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, whether it's private or, you know, government-owned institutions. It's that. And one of the things that we cannot rule out is this. When people find themselves in an environment, part of the first thing that happens is what is known or what is referred to as office politics. People form cartels, people form cliques, people form, you know, clusters that they begin to look out for their personal interest, their group interest, or everyone within their immediate group interest. So any other person outside that group, you know, looks like an enemy to them. So in an institution where you find a lot of these kinds of cluster, you're not even ruling out the fact that some lecturers have also been fingered to be members of cold groups. So those groups of people just gathering and collecting for their own personal interest. Imagine that there are 20 in an institution, for instance, and then one of them is like at the higher, or most of them are in the higher cadre of the administrative you know, members of the institution, and you're going to report maybe a junior one. Do you think those at the higher one are going to take action? They're not going to, because they're also going to look at the interest of that person, knowing full well that if they don't, the person might also have a scenario where he might need to look out for their interest, and that would not play out well. So it's a very well organized system of crime against not just the male student, the female student, rather, but also the male. Exactly. I always like to emphasize that within the university system, we have female lecturers who are harassing male students. But that is not as much as the male lecturers harassing female lecturers. I recall, I don't want to mention schools, but I know that I've had conversations with students, even when they are married. They tell you a lecturer sees a marriage ring, even attended your wedding while in school, but will tell you your husband should have known better not to marry while you're in school, knowing full well that, you know, lecturers would have interest. So you get to hear a lot of crazy things, you know, being spewed out by these men who are lusting after people or women they should not naturally do so. But because they feel, I'm the lecturer, I'm in charge, and if I don't pass you, you're going to fail. And if you're failing and you keep failing, eventually you have to drop out of school. And of course they know In Nigeria, most people who step into the institution will want to walk out, excuse me, of the institution with their certificate, graduate with good grades. So they use that as the bait to drag in a lot of women. Some women do give in even after, while being married, others don't. But of course, we know that the vindictive measures carried out by these lecturers and these women are just something that is inhuman and needs to be addressed. Because if we don't address it now, if we don't have policies set in place, we definitely might not get to that point. I know that there have been scenarios in institutions where lecturers are killed, and there are reports that maybe the student got involved with the lecturer because of a girl issue, and the lecturer got killed, and all of those scenarios. So for us to get to a point where lecturers understand that sex for grade is not just a crime against the woman, it's a crime against the educational system.
Exactly.
And then we get to prioritize punitive measures. How about withdrawing the license of these people? How about withdrawing their certificate? Let's return them back to zero so that they go back to school and then get to understand how it is to put somebody through hell when that person is paying fees, is paying all the charges that he's supposed to, is doing all that is supposed to be done within the academic calendar.
Don't even forget about the psychological trauma that most of these, victims have to undergo. Like when you think of education, you think of all the harassment that you had to go through just to get an education. First of all, we are already having the conversation that our education is not as thorough as it should be. So just to pass, all the written theories and jargons that we do in most of our schools, you will now still be harassed on top of the fact that you're not getting the quality of education that you should be getting. I mean, it's really, really alarming. And in the case of, Professor Ndifon, it's more like this is not the first time he had been highlighted for that particular issue. Now that, students had blown it out of proportion and taken it to the social media, now you're hearing everybody, canvas around the issue that this report has come before. Because of that, as a reason, as a result of that, now he has to, face the full wrath of the law and all of these kinds of things. So it's beyond appalling, to say the least.
The real reality in this country is that maybe we need to do a lot more publicity on the social media. Maybe we need to call people out directly on the social media, because it's becoming like a trend that institutions, corporate environments don't take action unless they find that on the social media. Take, for instance, banks. You have an issue with a bank and you run through the bank for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. It's not being sorted. But call out a bank on the social media just one day. The next day you find, in fact, as you're calling them out, somebody from the banking system is calling you to resolve that issue. They're inviting you over to the bank. So, and then you ask a question, is it not the same bank that have been laying this complaint? Is it not the same bank that have been going week in, week out without getting my complaint being resolved?
They're afraid of the bad publicity.
Exactly. So how is it that within 24 hours of, dragging them out on social media, everybody's now, running helter-skelter to make sure, the issue is being resolved? We need to, it's literally like everybody is doing public service or eye service. So if it is not in the public space and then the generality of the people are not going to see it, then we don't have to take action.
It's very important at this time, but we see, the Women's Network have maintained that, it is important that this particular bill be accented into law so that we have a very strong guideline with which to address these kinds of issues within our, higher institution of learning, also so that we are sure that our girls and our boys can go to school and graduate. It's more like, let's not add to the already existing problems that we have in our society. Let's not add that. We already know that for some of these persons, finding the school fees and every other thing to even go to school is difficult. You now come and add that. Now, sexual harassment upon sorting and all of those other things. So it's important if the president will hear out these women groups and every other person that is lending a voice to these, kinds of activities in our higher institutions of learning. But we'll let, that particular ugly trend rest this morning, but still talking women. Francis had, okay, this is not about the women, the FCTA, people that are refusing to retire after having served between 6 to 8 years as they are supposed to retire, and they just want to keep staying in the offices. Francis, this one is a big twist to the civil service.
Well, is it a big twist? sometimes things just happen that you need to ask certain questions. We know that in a civil service, it comes with, rules and regulations, and there's a stipulated age for retirement. We know that as of now, we have 10 directors in the Federal Capital Territory Administration who have spent over 8 years in office and have failed to proceed on mandatory retirement almost 1 month after the newly revised public service rule became operational. Directors were said to have spent between 9 and 12 years on the directorate cadre and were required to turn in their letters of retirement in compliance with the public service response, which took effect from July 27, 2023. Unfortunately, the head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Folashade Yemi, had in a memo dated 27th addressed to all permanent secretaries, Accountant General of the Federation, Auditor General of the Federation, and heads of extra ministerial department, or the strict compliance with the revised rules. The new rules also introduce a tenure policy for permanent secretaries who are now required to spend 4 years in office, which is renewable, subject to performance. Of course, sources from the FCT said the directors, Human Resource Management Bashir Mohammed, and his counterpart at the Christian Pilgrimage Board, Dabara Vingo, and others who were affected by the rule have yet to vacate office almost a month after the directive became operational. Okay, so you have 10 persons of the whole lot refusing to go, and it's been a month. First questions Nigerians would ask, who are these people exactly?
And why?
And why are they not obeyed? Now, 1 month, if it is few days, you would say, okay, maybe they're trying to pick up their things or rearrange their offices, pick their personal belongings or sort their personal belongings from
hand over documents of the institution properly.
So you understand that. But a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, and then there is no counter reaction from the leadership of the, the head of the civil service of the Federation. For impunity of this level to thrive, somebody somewhere is pressing a button. Somebody somewhere believes that he has link to a superior authority, a superior power that can override that which issues that directive. So it's a call on Falasha Deyemie-Sang to actually tell Nigerians whether or not we have some blue coats in the ministry that when laws are made, they are not bounded by those laws, and others can be bounded by the law. But I see this as being a very big problem in the event that the head of the civil service of the Federation is not able to address it right about now, because one already, staying in office for extra 1 month means they're going to be paid an extra 1 month salary, which means those who had gone will not be paid. So what happens when those people who had gone said, okay, we are taking our own leave, and these other 10 people didn't, and are being paid, so we have to also be paid? It's going to create a lot of challenges, a lot of issues for this federal government. But this, we ask me, needs to be addressed holistically and immediately.
I think there is a lot to look into, with regards to this particular case, because we know that all the other directors who were affected by the tenure policy have retired. But it's more like, halfway through their tenure and all of the activities, it seems like there was a reintroduction of a new policy that says at this time you are going to retire, and then some other person just felt, okay, the circular has been sent, there is nothing we can necessarily do against the system, and they went forward. But the likes of Mohammed and all the other people are thinking they have some kind of fight to put in. Why are we retired just out of the blue in that kind of situation? We see one of them even putting in a letter to extend his stay by 3 months. But when you say you want to extend your stay by 3 months, we have to look at all the modalities. What do you want to stay there to do? Remember that most of our public offices are alleged to be pipeline for all manner of corruption. Is it not easier for you to highlight yourself like you have, an ulterior motive in the office if you want to extend your stay? Because if we ask you to the furtherance of the ministry, of the agency, of the country, why exactly do you want your stay to be extended by another 3 months? Will you be able to provide that kind of information? Will you be able to, provide that blueprint as to why you should be allowed to stay beyond? But then on the reverse, we also need to look at how implementing new policies affect the people in the system. If this is not something that has been practiced for the longest time, because I mean, if these 10 people, when they were appointed into these offices, knew that statutorily, when it is 4 years, your time is of tantamountly is going to end, you're going to have to leave office. I don't think this is going to come out as a fresh fight, but when it's like a new introduction, a new clause in the activity of directors in the agency, then you might have people like this who think that they are activists attempting, to rebirth the system. But it needs to be looked at holistically. And we already see calls by certain people to ask the minister at the FCT, Nyesom Wike, to wade into the issue. We already know that as it stands, if Nyesom Wike wades into the issue, it's really going to be fire and brimstone approach, just to handle this. But it's important that the head of service, the head men at this particular parastatals at the FCTA should come together. These 10 people, what are your grievances? Why exactly don't you want to vacate office for the new people that have been given these roles so that work can go through, smoothly? Another concern you raised with regards to salaries, I mean, every organization has a system by which they pay salaries. So if you've been taken out of the job role and the system has already highlighted you as non-existent in that role, all we need to do is take you out of the IPPIS, take you out of our modalities for paying salary. If you sit down there the first month, the second month, keep spending your savings to come to work, and you realize that you're not going to be paid, maybe you're going to put yourself to, call yourself to redress. Did
you just say keep spending your savings? Are you really sure they're going to spend their personal money?
No, we are talking about in a situation where it's a normal human being. Well,
it might not be. No normal human being in the first place will hear a directive coming from government and not first and foremost obey. Because even if you have issues, you have concerns about it, you feel you've been,
maligned,
your rights have been infringed upon, your first reaction should be to respect that. Then you can take it up through the legal measures or through every other constitutional channel to get back your right. But not sit down and then claim that your right has been infringed upon, and then in the process of doing that, you're also breaking a law. Because once a directive has been given, the first rule of engagement within the organized sector is to obey. It's like literally just walking into an office. Let's say, for instance, you're getting fired, or maybe you're getting a query and then you're asked to sign the query later to receive the copy, and you're saying, I can't sign, I'm not taking the query. That's first another offense added to whatever it is you did before you were given the query. So first and foremost, I believe this 10 the civil servant needs to have obeyed the directive. Yes, you feel your rights have been infringed upon, take it up through the appropriate measures. I mean, we know that we've seen scenarios where Nigerians go to court and say, oh, my right has been infringed upon. We've seen scenario playing out where people who were sacked, especially within the last administration, headed to court and said my tenure wasn't due, constitutionally I still had XYZ, and the court says, yes, this person is right, return the person. But for that to happen, you first as an individual need to respect the Constitution, and then you can get the rights that you truly deserve.
Well, something else that we must categorically put out there is the fact that this is attempting to work with a revised public service rule, which came into effect on the 27th of July 2023. So as the word goes, it's a revised public service rule. It's not like it was existent by the time these persons came into office. The corporation sat together, revised their guidelines and their rules, how they want to go about activities within the organization, and then decided to implement it on the 27th of July. So we might see a place where the grievances of these 10 persons, is stemming from. But are they in their rights? Would say no. But like I said earlier, we have to look at all the ends that, springing up all these kinds of issues. Why are they aggrieved? Is there a way to go around, the aggrieved and settle them, differently? When they came, it's another thing with our public structure. When people get into these public offices, they just think they are going to stay for the rest of their lives. It's the same thing we see with our politicians. You get elected once, and in the next 20, 25, 30 years, you're still in the same office, not doing anything. So we see a lot of people also going into the higher career of public service offices and thinking, oh, once I get there, I know I'm going to stay there until I can drop dead or, you know, retire because I'm really, really old and weary. So these are some of the issues that we have within the system. But of course, as expected, Minister Nyesom Wike might be wading into the matter, or let's see how the head of service, Folashade Yemieson, is going to be handling this. But we'll just let that particular story to rest and head on to the very next inclusive democracy for women in the Tinubu-led administration under the 10th NAS. Last season, under the last administration, we saw the move by the 9th Assembly. There was that bid, 35% affirmative. The wife of the former president and the wife of the former vice president also had taken a move at some point, even attended plenary just to push that conversation forward. Let's have certain specific reserved seats in the houses, you know, in the Senate, reserved for women. Let us have, you know, some committees reserved for women to head and the like. But we saw the fact that, you know, they were taken out of that particular bill. No one really paid attention. Some of those bills were not accented to. But we seem to see a revision of those bills, and the move looks really good at this time for the 10th NAS and women in politics today.
Well, seeing this kind of move being made is just one of the happiest moments for me, because I believe, as posited by the SDGs, for Nigeria and other countries and continents of the world to be able to achieve most of the things listed in the SDGs, we need to prioritize the issue of women inclusivity in governance, in leadership positions, in government quarters, the organized private sector, in the business world. Every aspect of human life needs to be normalized, or we need to normalize the practice of having women, you know, coexisting at a significant level of percentage side by side with men. That's the only way we can achieve the desired growth, the desired advancement that we're looking forward to as a nation and as a people. So seeing this, you know, the 10th National Assembly, the House of Rep, I'm hoping the Senate will follow in the same direction, getting to bring back the bills. I'm hoping that it's not just another, it's not just a political move to seem like they're on the path of doing the right thing, but let it be that at the end of the day, we have these bills, you know, being signed into law after, you know, passing through due diligence at the National Assemblies, both the House of Reps and that of the Senate, so that we can have President Ahmed Bola Tinubu accent to them, and then they become a legal instrument to guide decisions from the party level. Because most times, even at the party level, you find that it's not like women don't, you know, vie for these respective positions, but because there is no constitutional mandate, directive, or guidelines to ensure that a certain percentage is given out to the women, the parties themselves literally will give out all the tickets to the men. And then the few places that you find women would just happen to be those very few women who many Nigerians would say seem to have found favor with the highest of the highest within the ranks and files of the party. So outside of that, the average woman within the party system who doesn't know anybody cannot also vie for these offices and then get the ticket. So if we have the legal framework in place, we have the laws in place, and we have strict penalties, such as maybe if a party is found wanting in, you know, the percentage that has been stipulated by the law, such party is not going to stand for election, which means if for any reason a party does not meet up with the quota that has been, you know, assigned by law to women, so you risk losing out of election that period. If we have that kind of stricter punishment or punitive measures being part of the legislations that are currently that are about to be worked on, then we will see party men, we'll see the political parties in Nigeria rising up to normalize giving women the right of place within politics. That way, we will be able to get to a point where we have complete conversations around women equality, gender equality, gender issues. And trust me, yeah, when we have this percentage of women, their performances, their engagement will further drive a lot more discussions about issues bordering women, issues surrounding women, women's growth, women liberation, women advancement, and by extension, each and every one of us. So for me, this is a welcome development. I'm hoping that, we get to see this speedily being attended to by the National Assembly?
I think that, this is very instructive at this time, for us to see, because if we have more women in elected positions, more than just appointed, because I know that part of the conversations that the 10th NAS under Senator Godswill Akpabio they were having is also to see how we can have some more women in appointive positions, within the government, so that we have more women participating in governance. But if we can push the drive to have more women in elected positions, then it will balance out the conversation. But I remember that one of the strongest conversations we've had about having women in politics is the fact that women on their own need to rise to take those positions. Literally, the men folk will not just hand it down to them. Neither will the electorate just say, oh, we like this woman and even the things she's done in our society, let's go and elect her into some of these offices. It may not just come on a platter of gold. Certain kinds of investment need to be made to have these kinds of things. So there is also a very strong call to see women rise to the occasion, to say we demand that we be given these kinds of opportunity. I mean, it was this week that we're speaking with the professional female engineers in the country, asking the president to give them the opportunity within a year to work on one moribund refinery. Yes, that's a good call. If women keep rising and putting themselves in a pedestal to be seen and to be heard and given opportunities, whether it's within the professional sphere or the political sphere, then we'll be changing the narrative. So that takes me also to seeing how that the wife of the president at this time, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, is also positioning herself to change the political narrative, to change the political conversation around women, under her husband's dispensation as president of the Federal Republic. Because, I mean, see, gathering this women, and then she's been having different kinds of meetings, with female stakeholders since she, also came into the office of the First Lady, not constitutionally now, but we've been seeing her move. If she continues to hold these kinds of strong conversations, have these kinds of push, we may see more bills, more gender-friendly bills in favor of women being enacted by the 10th NAS. We've also seen the body language of the 10th NAS, even that of the House of Representatives. We also saw Tajuddin Abbas, Speaker of the House of Representatives, push a move also to make sure that women are supported in these kinds of roles in the 10th, assembly, as it were. So I think we are standing on, a bright ray of hope for women under the Tinubu-led administration. We're talking inclusivity in governance. We are, talking about giving the chance to be elected and appointed into very responsive and key roles, within governance. And I think it will, give us a large rate of success. Do not even forget that Nigeria is one of the countries in Africa that is doing poorest with regards to the percentage of women that we have in our politics. Liberia had long overturned those numbers, and some other African countries for that matter. And we keep having this conversation. We cannot be the giant of Africa for nothing. We can't keep having that name without living up to the expectations or the demands of having that kind of honor. We need to see things being put in place, at the right time for the right people. Let's see more women, and also let us see, beyond clamoring for women, to be in these positions, let's see more capable women, who, when entrusted with these positions, will serve the people, will let us know that, oh, for the longest time, we have actually been missing out on having women in the reel of government. And this is, what we have been missing because of the precedents and some of the results that these women bring to bear. So I think we are living in really good times. Kudos to the wife of the president for the move. Kudos to all of the women who are rallying around her at this time to make sure that the narrative is changed under this administration.
Well, if you ask me, are the women putting themselves out there enough? I'll say they are doing the best they can within the means that are being provided for them. I'll say they are doing the best within the system that they find themselves. I would say two things are responsible. Let's start from Akwa. During the just concluded election, we saw two women vying for the #1 position. How many women voted for them? How many women rallied around?
How many women even knew that they were running for this?
But these were women who had done a lot to put themselves. They were on billboards. They were doing, media rounds. They were doing campaigns. But look at the number of women who turn out to support them compared to the number of women who turn out to support the men. Then you look away from that. Let's look at the system itself. It seems there is a myth that is crafted so much to feel like when a woman does something wrong, it is unforgivable. But when a man does something wrong, it is it's permissible. And I'm bringing that in because of the uproar that greeted, you know, the Desiani Maduke's case when she was the petroleum minister in Nigeria. We are in Nigeria. We've seen different men in public positions pilfering from the public treasuries. But do we see the kind of outpouring of condemnations that greeted Desiani's case? Everybody literally feels that, oh, because she's a woman, she shouldn't have done it. But we are all humans. It's like the question of cheating. You say men are, when men cheat is excusable, but when a woman's cheat is something that should be killed or she should be killed for. But both men and women are, you know, created in the same image and likeness of God. So what is good for one, it should be good for the other.
Exactly. I like when you say what is good, you know, for what is good for the goose should be good for the gander in this political sphere.
But seriously, jokes aside, this myth is one of the things that has kept a lot of people, women in chains. Let me use that word. Because the politicians would say, within the politics, you say, for instance, kind of woman vie for some of the biggest political parties. Now we have PDP, APC, and Labour Party and NPP. Let's say in the next 4 years, a woman is coming under the platform of the PDP, I want to be the president. Can the party give that woman a ticket? Even when she's competent enough, even when through her track record they can see that she has what it takes. Now, it takes my mind to a conversation that, was trending when Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala became the boss of the World Trade Organization. Part of the conversations that were being had as at that time was, if this was Nigeria, will the men in this country allow Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala to become the #1 woman there? And of course, the answer we know, the reactions that would have come, even now as the World Trade Center boss, a lot of conversations, a lot of internal fights would have seen bring, why is a woman heading us? Why should it be a woman? And all of those conversations. You fail to look at the competence of that woman. You fail to look at the qualification of that woman. You fail to look at her capabilities and her ability and what she's bringing to the table. So we need to, as a country, we need to rebrand the mindset of men to understand that women were created and they came into this world with equal opportunities, equal rights, and equal abilities to also tackle responsibilities. I mean, if we have to even go to biblical, the woman was created to help man. And for you to be able to help the next person, it means you have in abundance to be able to offer that help.
Exactly. But we also see that on the heel of that same National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies conference, the president of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, highlighted the need to do away with gender stereotypes and biases, as well as the absence of modeling as some of the factors that have hindered the low turnout of women in governance. We also see the fact that he also said he desires to see more women in governance, but that it was easier to promote more women in appointed positions than elected positions. So that's exactly the conversation we are having. Why is it easier to have more women in appointed positions than it is to, to have them in elected positions? And then even if you're talking about appointed positions, how many women were appointed as ministers of the Federal Republic, in the just concluded cabinet, constitution that we had. So it still brings a really big question. I think we have about 7 or 8 women in that entire cabinet of 45 persons. So it's still the same question. If the Senate president is saying, oh, it's easier to appoint our women into appointed positions than it will be to get them into elected positions, well, that on its own is a biased statement, because why should it be easier to get one than the other? We should be able to have a balance where we see that women can, if they want to go for elected positions, have it. If they want to, be appointed, they're available for that. But, well, we at least can see the willingness and the body language of the 10th NAS to be supportive of the drive of women to, get on into these kinds of saddle of responsibility. Also, of course, we saw Abubakar Suleiman say that since 1999, women's representation in governance has not exceeded 10%, and expressed displeasure over the declining rate. Of course, since 1999, when we could say, oh, we came into democratically elected governance and all of these things, we have not had women break the ceiling of being involved in politics for more than 10%. And even as we stand, the numbers are still dwindling. Not like we're even still standing at that 10%. So there's a whole, shaking up that we need to do with regards to this. But we also know that the first place to address a lot of issues is dialogue and, these kinds of discussions being brought to the fore, gathering the women who have those kinds of drives. So we see that, this was a conference that was good. It was a good one. Holding it was good. Changing the narrative, having the discussion, putting the spotlight on the women who can get these jobs done is also a very good one. But let's move to a very last story. I think is one of the biggest troubles on the table of discussion this morning. The fracas that is going on in the Labour Party. We know that prior to the 2023 election, little or nobody heard about the Labour Party. No one was necessarily concerned as to who the national chairman of the party was. But once the beautiful bride of that particular party, being the person of His Excellency Peter Obi, came on, everyone, almost all of a sudden decided to be a person of repute within the party. And there's been, this tussle between Lamidi Papa and, Abure as to who is going to be, the party chairman. A lot happened, and in the first place, we saw Abure being suspended in the first leg, and then Lamidi Papa took on that position. Eventually, it was also overturned, and Abure was reinstated. But just yesterday, we also saw was it yesterday now, 2 days back, we saw information that the appeal court has once again sacked Abure and reinstated Lamidi Papa as national chairman of the Labour Party. This in wrangling is not making sense to the layman again, because when you have conversation with Labour Party stalwarts, they will tell you that no problem of this magnitude is going on in their party.
Well, one of the biggest challenges Nigerian politicians, even during the just concluded elections, have been, posited as one of the problems we have in the country is the legal system. Where you see today the legal system upturns a verdict, or upturns an election result, or upturns a directive of a party, and then another person is brought in, and then you go back tomorrow, a higher court upturns that same decision in favor of another, and then you go back, the most senior court in the land now upturns. So it's the biggest state of confusions. When you ask, doesn't this court have laid down procedures? Don't the members of the judiciary understand the laws themselves that they are sworn to interpret? Because it just seems like you go here, this lawyer, this judge interprets the law as suits his own understanding. You go to the next person interprets as it suits his understanding. Like literally, it seems there is no uniformity in the legal system. There is no uniformity in the judiciary system. There is no uniformity for you to know that, okay, if this case goes before the court, based on these evidences that I have, or that has been provided before the law court, the case is going to go like this. And then you go to another court, the case will go like this. If you have the same line of argument, the same line of conversation, the same lineup of evidences, and then you go through 3 different courts, and the 3 different courts give 3 different or 2 different, verdict, it questions the integrity of the judiciary system. It questions the authenticity of the men. It questions the credibility of the men that we have trusted with the interpretation of the law. So scenarios like these just makes it a lot more difficult. We know that in between this saga, there have been allegations that people from outside are trying to overturn the internal democracy of the Labour Party. But then for people to be able to infiltrate into the Labour Party, definitely there is somebody within the Labour Party that is lending a helping hand to people outside. And if this is what some members of the Labour Party are positing, that is a move to ensure that the party is already in a crisis while there is a case ongoing in court, then whoever is, masterminding it is actually doing a good job.
The distraction is strong.
Because the distraction is strong, and the house that is divided against itself is already a big problem. We know that at this point, the focus of the Labour Party presidential candidate and the team should be on the case they have in court. But when you begin to bring in these internal, wrangling, internal crises and fight for supremacy, it's literally like what happened during the election that we saw in the APC. For instance, in Akwa Ibom State, where we had two factional leaders, vying for the state chairmanship of the party. So it's something that the Labour Party needs to holistically address at this point. Since if the court has failed, then they can look for other measures within the party system to actually resolve it.
And I think this goes beyond just saying the fact that Julius Abure has been ousted once again by a court and Lamidi Apapa is put in. There are also other integral party activities that this jostling is affecting. We see the fact that a court that was sitting in Owerri, the appeal court, of course, in Owerri, which has now been moved to Abuja, stating security reasons, had invalidated all the off-season governorship primary elections conducted by the national chairman of the party, Julius Abure. Now, the court sitting also ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to immediately recognize candidates in Imo, Bayelsa, and Kogi State produced by the Lamidi Apapa-led National Working Committee. So we are seeing, this, it is going to affect the outing of the party at the off-season elections that are coming. Whose designates are we taking? Is it the ones that Julius Abure brought forward? Is it the ones that Lamidi Apapa brought forward? But like he said, the strongest energy to addressing this issue would be the Labour Party going beyond courts, because party politics should be played by parties. When we see us taking all of the energies and heading to the courts of jurisdiction to solve intra-party crisis, then it's just overturns the whole thing. And like you asked the big question, doesn't the Labour Party have a constitution that guides its operations such that everyone is just dangling whatever carrots they can at this time and taking, like you said, one court says this, another court says that tomorrow? But of course, we have seen that Julius Abure has come out to reject the appeal court's judgment, ousting him as the national chairman of the Labour Party. We're just going to see how this particular case turns out, but we can know for certain and say for certain that this is really going to upturn things within the Labour Party at this time. And like we said, if this is an organized distraction strategy, it is really, really, having a ground on, the Labour Party. But of course, we'll try to get in some Labour Party stalwart to explain what exactly is going on within the party in the course of time. But this is where we're going to let the conversation to rest at this point, and we'll be heading to the news brief desk where Mary Joseph is on standby to bring us tidbits of global news. When we return, there's some really strong conversation we need to have. The effect of the Japa syndrome. Is it really safe to be running in and out of the country? How are those in diaspora really faring? Stay with us when we return. Rise and Shine continues.
and government, Secretary General, distinguished delegates.
Disasters being Lagos Nigerian for Spectrum TV to recover from the lapses in the county.
A very good morning to you and welcome to your morning news briefing Spectrum, live from Uyo. I am Mary Joseph. We begin the news brief with a report that Google, Netflix, Facebook and other foreign companies operating in Nigeria have paid over 1.89 trillion naira in taxes to the account of the federal government in 15 months. The figure includes both companies' income tax and value-added tax and data from the National Bureau of Statistics. Meanwhile, according to the Federal Inland Revenue Service, CIT is a 30% tax imposed on the profits of companies, and VAT is a 7.5% consumption tax paid when goods are purchased and services rendered and borne by the final consumer. Away from that, the Women's Network has appealed to President Bola Tinubu to assent to the Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal of Sexual Harassment in Tertiary Educational Institutions Bill passed by the 9th National Assembly. The group also recommended that the educational institution in Nigeria should, as a matter of necessity, develop a sexual and gender-based harassment policy to safeguard the dignity of girls with a view to providing a safe environment for learning. In the meantime, all marketers have insisted on a possible hike in the pump price of premium motor spirits, popularly called petrol, following a further plunge in the value of the naira against the United States dollar. The local currency weakened against the greenback at the black market from 900 naira per dollar on Wednesday and 920 naira per dollar on Thursday, raising further concerns about whether the pump price of petrol could be sold at the current price. We head straight down to the foreign scene where French President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday demanded the release of Nigerian President Mohamed Bazoum, who was detained on July 26, 2023 in a military coup led by the former commander of Niger's Presidential Guard, Abdurrahmane Tichani. Macron also called for a return to democratic order in Niger, a former French colony whose elected leadership was toppled in a military coup in July. And finally, in sports, Blessing Onu, the chairperson of the House of Representatives, had a committee on the financial dispute between the Falcons and the Nigerian Football Federation, has ordered the football body to produce payment slips for players and official of women's national team at the 2019 Women's World Cup in France. Blessing Onu, who made this known in Abuja while quizzing the NFF President Ibrahim Gusau, who appeared before the committee, said documents of how the Falcons were funded at the 2019 Women's World Cup, the breakdown of match bonuses and the payment slips of 23 players and the coaching crew be provided by the NFF before the August 30th. We'll have details of this and more in our news at 12. I am Mary Joseph. Let's head back to Rise and Shine where we have Francis and Uyai on standby. Do have a wonderful morning.
State and government, Secretary General, distinguished delegates.
Disasters being Lagos Nigerian for Spectrum TV to recover from the lapses in the county.
Glad to welcome you back. This is still Rise and Shine coming to you live on Uyo, the very beautiful city of Akwa Ibom State, and we Spectrum TV. And of course, you can catch us across our social media platform at Spectrum TV.ng to be part of our online community. This morning, talking Nigeria and the world, we held conversations about the sexual harassment, sex for grades, that started off with the protest of the law students in the University of Calabar. Of course, yesterday we saw UNIZIC students also protesting the harassment of lecturers on the part of female students and calling for concrete actions to be taken. Well, we see a lot of move by the National Assembly also towards bringing back some of the gender-related bills that were thrown out by the 9th National Assembly, in the hope that these would bring about the much desired balancing in the affairs of politics, leadership, and of course, when it comes to protecting the rights of women within the Nigerian society. We're also looking at the fact that the first lady of Nigeria, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, is also making very significant strides in making sure that conversations around women advancement, promoting the rights of women is being championed. We also see women groups writing to Ahmed Bola Tinubu to accent the sexual harassment bill so that we can have a legal framework to prosecute people who are harassing, women, like what we're seeing across the Nigerian institutions. Of course, we also talked about the mandatory retirement, which, of course, we have 10 FCTA directors sharing the federal government directive to resign. All of this narrowed down to politics, the current crisis within the new baby, the Nigerian political space, talking about the Labour Party and the party crisis as to who is going to be the authentic leader at the national level. Of course, we are going to continue with the rest of our conversations before getting to Delhi Spotlight. Just within the course of the week, we heard that Nigeria had not been able to meet its oil quota for the month of July. And then, of course, this is August, and still a lot of concerns and conversations bordering on the fact that we might not, as a country, again, meet with the oil quota. But it seems like all of this is just vain conversations on the part of the leadership of this country, because we see in the midst of Nigeria not being able to meet its oil quota and all of the challenges, the loss in revenue, there is literally a week out that we don't hear there's a destruction of vessels laden with crude oil. So we see the Navy destroy 350,000 liters of oil-laden vessels in River State. That's just one of the many incidences of this kind of scenario playing out in Nigeria. How did we get to this point in this country? Who exactly are the people in charge of the affairs of the Nigerian Armed Forces? What exactly is happening in this country that we are losing money in the oil and gas sector? We are not able to meet our quota, but weekday, week out, week in, week out, daily in this country, the Nigerian Navy, the Air Force, they are destroying vessels loaded with crude oil. Could this crude oil not be rechanneled to meet the production quota of the country? Why is President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the one in charge of the Petroleum Ministry not speaking up? Why is the directive by the National Assembly that was given for the Nigerian Armed Forces to not destroy vessels laden with crude oil not being enforced? Why are we in a country that seems to not know what it is what it's doing? Why do our leaders speak from one side of the mouth and fail to act to complement what they're being said? This is very, very, very painful for me as a person. It's very painful for Nigerians. It's literally like the Nigerian society is helpless because the leaders themselves seem clueless. How do we have these amounts of crude oil being wasted away in the name of destruction, in the name of standard operational procedures, in the name of whatever terminology is being given to it by the armed forces? This oil belongs to Nigeria. This oil, you say stolen, can still be rechanneled to meet up with the quota of oil production. can we ever get to see this problem of the dwindling revenue of Nigeria being stopped as a result of activities within the oil sector?
The problem is that with this conversation, there is nothing that is standard, with this particular procedure. When we keep on naming the fact that we have, we keep falling below the OPEC quota for us as a nation, but yet people are going into our rigs and, they're digging out crude oil, and whether they stole it or whether they went in the, proper, following the proper guidelines, but yet, since this destruction of vessels started, Francis, if we calculate how much crude oil has been destroyed in the country since the spate of this destruction started, you would see that we would cover almost a month worth, of production that we're supposed to, have delivered as a country. It is even the layman will tell you that this move you are making is wrong. But how come we as a country, we are making these decisions every now and then? At the end of the day, you ask a really strong question: who are the leaders of the Nigerian armed forces? Who gives them the shots? Yes, they are the leaders of the Nigerian army, the Air Force, and all of this. But we thought that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the chief, the commander of the chief of the armed forces. If you are the commander, why not call the people who are your subordinates to order? Why are we wasteful of natural resources? First of all, do not even forget that through meteorology, you would know that natural resources can become extinct in a particular location. So if we are even like this, countries are boasting of having this crude and other natural resources in reserves, but we were saying it was stolen, we are destroying it, we are burning it. Number two, let us look at the environmental effects and impact of burning this crude in the country. You are disseminating all manner of molecules and all manner of things back into the atmosphere that is going to travel beyond the waters of Rivers State and keep traveling into the atmosphere. I mean, we are talking about wind, we are talking about air. It's going to travel from there as far out as anywhere it chooses to in the world, for that matter. And then we are complaining of anthrax, we are complaining of diphtheria, we are complaining of cancer, we are complaining of this, but we are part of the people that are contributing to these factors and phenomena in our environment. Why don't we call ourselves to order? How hard can it be? First of all, do not forget that environmentalists and experts in different fields are calling the Nigerian army to order. They're saying these things you people are doing, further destroying the climate. Now, let's not even forget the conversation about climate change. It was Tedros Ghebreyesus, a few weeks back, who said, we are not even in the time where we are saying, what's the conversation again? Climate change is so serious. He said, the planet is beginning to boil. If people of very forward-thinking nations and developed worlds are looking for how to, stabilize their climate and all of that, is it Nigeria that is not able to take care of the barest minimum problems that will be able to tackle the impact of climate change when it begins to rain down on us as a people? It's counterproductive. Whether you're looking at it from the OPEC window, whether you're looking at it from the environmental window, whether you're looking at it from the health window, it is just irresponsible of everyone who is involved in taking this particular decision.
It is completely irresponsible. It is completely illogical. It is completely foolish. It is completely counterproductive. The height of the service to the Nigerian community, the height of the service to the Nigerian people, the height of the service to the community itself, the height of the service to Mother Nature itself, all of this high level of the service is something that should no longer be tolerated in Nigeria. And if Ahmed Bola Tinubu is truly the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, if he's truly in charge of the armed forces of Nigeria, if the armed forces of this country are truly subject to democracy, then the directive by the National Assembly should be obeyed and implemented to the letter. Because I see no reason why the National Assembly would say no more burning of vessels laden with crude oil, and the military will say we are following standard operational procedure. What is standard about you destroying lots of liters of fuel, liters of petroleum product that should have contributed to helping the country meet its target on a monthly basis? What is standard about causing harm to the environment? What is standard about ensuring that you're putting the lives of people you had sworn to protect in further danger. Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And many people will say these kinds of scenarios only happen when you see people are sitting as figureheads in government agencies which they do not have control of. They are sitting there as the leaders, but they have no grasp as to what is happening. They have no grasp as to putting an end to whatever anomalies or misdemeanor that is happening within their agencies. So at this point in time, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, also doubling as the one in charge of the petroleum sector, you need to rise up. The National Assembly, we need to call the leadership of the armed forces of Nigeria to order. We need to call the men and women of the armed forces to order. We need them to understand that the oil that is being destroyed belongs to Nigeria. That oil can actually be rechanneled to take care of meeting the production quota of Nigeria. If you don't want to channel it to production, put it into something else, put it into use. But destroying the oil, whether it's being stolen or is loaded in a vessel that you call stolen vessel or reportedly stolen, the fact that this oil is from Nigeria, this oil belongs to Nigeria, this oil is not contaminated. You've not told Nigerians that, okay, because it's been recruited, it's being done this way, there's a problem with the oil. You've not told us. And even if you were to tell Nigerians that there are always ways to redefine or refine this oil in line with international best practices and still make it useful for the generality of Nigerians. So it's time for us to not just sit down at the National Assembly and issue directive. It's time for people to be punished. Because if we do not punish the men and women of the Nigerian security forces, the bombings of our waterways, the bombing of vessels reportedly loaded with crude oil will continue. And will be, it's childish. It's childish that the government is complaining we're not able to meet, production quota on a monthly basis because of oil theft. But yet, the big question we need to ask, between the government, within the members, within the ranks and files of government agencies, the armed forces, the executive arm of government, and those pointed to be oil theft, who is truly causing the most damage to Nigeria? No, that's the question we need to ask ourselves at this point. Who is truly causing the most damage to Nigeria? Is it those people who are stealing the crude oil? Or the Nigerian armed forces who makes it their responsibility to keep bombing vessels loaded with crude oil? Yes, you are doing a great job. You are catching people who are stealing the Nigerian crude oil. But you are doing a worse disservice in the process of doing that. Because it would have been a different thing if you catch those people, bring in the crude oil, it gets rechanneled into meeting the government's quota. It gets rechanneled into bringing in the much desired revenue. But when you're catching the thieves, you're destroying two things. You're destroying the evidence that should have even allowed these people to be, brought to justice. So when you're now going before the law court to prosecute these people, where are the evidences?
Well, this is a problem that Nigeria has to answer to. The National Assembly has to really tell us, who is who in this country. The president really needs to tell us who is who in this country, because we are just, further driving the nation aground. But these are really pressing issues. We need to handle it as soon as possible, or else we are going to have, because we can't even start having the conversation as to the percentage of stolen crude that we have going on in our country. So every week and every day we find stolen crude, we are going to keep burning 350,000 liters worth of crude, natural resource extracted from the soil, of our country, wasted, afflamed into the atmosphere for the people of Rivers State and the people of the country to inhale. And very soon, remember that we do not have working healthcare systems, we do not have vaccines, we do not even have infrastructure, equipment in our hospitals to take care of the repercussion. Remember that the people that are signing and sitting in the offices and signing and giving the order for those things to be burned, once they have headache, they are going to go to the United Kingdom, they're going to go to the UAE, they're going to go to the United States to treat that headache. You better think of the vulnerable Nigerians that we have in this country and take decisions that are suitable for the vulnerable. And it takes me back to the biggest cry that we keep having. Nigerians need to be awake. Nigerians, the parlance in the day says, you know, Nigerians need to be woke. We need to take elections in this country seriously. We need to take analyzing the people we send into government offices and public offices very seriously. The laissez-faire attitude with politics and who is, you know, who gets what done should be done away with, because if we stay on the path that the last election birthed, in the next couple of years we will actually see the narrative change. But if, you know, Nigerians renege on that energy that was birthed in the last circle of election, then we'll be having really serious problems on our hands, because as it stands, the leaders of our country are running Nigeria to the ground. Add that to the Nigerians who are also cooperating with them. But we'll just drop that particular conversation. It's really troubling, really, really troubling. But we'll let it go at this time. And we do hope that, you know, government is listening to us. We do hope that the Nigerian Navy, the Nigerian Air Force, everyone who is involved in this kind of activity is listening to us, and let them make the best choices for Nigeria and its environment. But